On what seemed like an ordinary day in a quiet neighborhood, a 6-year-old boy's life was turned upside down in an instant. One moment, Kel was enjoying his mother's pancakes and heading off to school with a smile. By nightfall, he faced a devastating loss that would uncover hidden truths about his father and test the strength of his spirit. Welcome to Motivation for Success, where we share stories of resilience, hope, and the human capacity to overcome even the darkest of moments. If tales of courage inspire you, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story that could transform your perspective. Today, we follow Kel's heartbreaking journey and the unexpected allies, a courageous grandmother and a man named David, who step in to change his fate. Stay tuned as we unravel this emotional story of love, betrayal, and redemption. It all started on a sunny weekday morning in a quiet neighborhood near Northridge town. The wide streets were lined with leafy trees, and children often rode bikes along them, laughing without a care. Kel, a bright 6-year-old boy who normally bounced out of bed each morning, had just finished breakfast with his mother, Paula, who always made his favorite pancakes. That day, she tucked him into the family car and dropped him off at school, assuring him she'd pick him up in the afternoon. Kel had no idea that it would be the last memory he'd ever share with his mother. Throughout the day, he listened to lessons, played games at recess, and chatted with his classmates about what new things they'd do after school. But in a cruel twist of fate, everything changed during the final hour of classes. The school principal, looking unusually grave, came into the classroom, whispered something to the teacher, and beckoned Kel out into the hallway. He noticed how the principal's eyes shone with tears. Kel's heart pounded wildly. In the principal's office, he saw his father, Martin, standing near the window. Martin was staring outside, hands jammed in his pockets, body rigid. "Dad?" Kel whispered, confusion building in his chest. Slowly, Martin turned, gaze ice cold. "Your mother had an accident, Kel," he said, voice tight. She didn't make it." The words slammed into Kel like a physical blow. He stood there, stunned, as his father's expression showed no hint of grief or solace. Before Kel could even process the news, Martin motioned for him to follow. At 6 years old, Kel's entire world had just caved in. The drive back to the house was impossibly silent. Martin didn't say a word, hands gripping the steering wheel, eyes locked on the road. When they arrived at the small one-story home near a local park, everything seemed the same on the outside: the yard, the porch, the curtains drawn in Paula's favorite color. But inside, Kel immediately felt a suffocating emptiness. He dropped his school bag and looked around, half expecting his mother to appear and greet him with a warm hug. Instead, Martin's flat voice came from somewhere behind him: "You need to be strong now, Kel. Things have changed, and we have to move on." With that, he disappeared into his bedroom, leaving Kel alone in the living room, hugging a cushion that still smelled faintly of Paula's favorite perfume. At night, Kel lay awake on his bed, recalling how Paula would always tuck him in, read him a story, and kiss him on the forehead. Now there was no bedtime story, no comforting presence, only Martin's curt "good night," if he even bothered to say anything. The large, airy house that once rang with laughter felt like a dark cave, and Kel began to wonder if his father even cared that Paula was gone. Days blurred into weeks, and Martin's attitude crystallized into something Kel found painful to endure. It wasn't just neglect, it was an active coldness. If Kel left toys around the house or asked for help with simple tasks, Martin's responses were harsh. "Put your stuff away. I'm not your maid," he'd bark, or "Stop expecting me to do everything your mother did." Kel missed the breakfasts Paula used to make, missed how she'd tie his shoelaces because his fingers couldn't do it quite right. Martin didn't fill any of those gaps. One Saturday, Kel dared to mention how Paula would play music on weekend mornings and dance with him in the living room. "Mom used to put on that silly old radio station," he said softly, half smiling at the memory, "and we'd spin around until we got dizzy." Martin didn't even lift his eyes from the newspaper. "Well, she's not here now." "Stop dwelling on it," he muttered, turning a page sharply. At 6, Kel felt more alone than he could ever articulate. The happiness and warmth he once knew seemed to fade, replaced by Martin's bitterness and a deep ache for the mother he lost too soon. Soon, Diana arrived on the scene. She was Paula's mother and Kel's grandmother, living a couple of towns away. With her short, silver hair and gentle manner, she had always been a calming presence. When Kel saw her open the front door, he flew into her arms, tears finally spilling from eyes that had tried so hard to be strong as Martin demanded. "Kel, sweet boy, are you okay?" Diana asked, her own voice trembling. Over his shoulder, she noticed Martin lurking in the hallway, arms folded, expression impatient. "We're doing fine, Mother," he said stiffly. "Kel is adjusting." She forced a polite nod, though every fiber of her being told her Martin was lying. The house felt heavy with sorrow and unresolved tension. In the living room, Diana and Kel talked quietly, while Martin mostly stayed out of sight. Kel felt safer, but he didn't understand the swirl of adult concerns etched into his grandmother's face. She asked about how Martin treated him, if he had enough to eat, and if he still did any activities for fun. Kel's responses were hesitant, a bit vague. Even at 6, he sensed that telling too much might anger his father. But he couldn't help letting slip that Martin had never really comforted him about Paula's death. "He just says it's over, that I should get used to it," Kel told her, eyes downcast. It was enough for Diana to suspect that Kel was in more trouble than he realized. After that day, she started visiting more often, each time noticing signs of deeper neglect. Kel seemed thinner. The house was a mess, with dirty dishes piled up and laundry undone. Martin frequently said he was busy or too tired. Whenever Diana questioned him, he'd lash out, "Quit meddling, old woman. Kel's my son, and I know how to raise him." The more Diana saw, the more determined she became to rescue Kel. Late at night, she would lie awake, considering the idea of filing for custody. She was no wealthy socialite, just a retiree with limited funds, but her grandson's welfare overshadowed her own financial fears. "I need a lawyer's opinion," she said to herself one night, eyes filling with tears at the thought of confronting Martin in court. She sought advice from a local attorney, who warned her that challenging a biological father with stable finances might be an uphill battle. But Diana couldn't ignore the gnawing sense that Kel's life, both emotional and physical, was on a slow path to ruin. She felt that Martin's indifference masked something more sinister. What Diana and Kel didn't know was that Martin's motivations extended beyond mere convenience. Desperate for money, Martin had discovered that Paula had left a life insurance policy meant for Kel. And with Paula gone, Martin believed he should have unrestricted control over those funds. He saw Kel as an obstacle, someone he needed to manipulate, or even remove from his path to that financial windfall. One chilly afternoon, a letter arrived at the house while Kel was at school. Martin read it, discovering that Diana had filed for custody. Enraged, he crumpled the paper in his fist. "How dare she," he hissed. Yet, instead of raging openly, Martin decided to play it smart. From that day on, he changed his tune toward Kel, showering him with false kindness. "Want me to buy you some new toys?" he offered, forcing a wide grin that never reached his eyes. Kel was baffled. He had rarely seen his father smile since Paula's death. Why the sudden shift? They went shopping at a fancy mall, out to a theme park, and even to a big arcade. Martin used these outings as photo ops, snapping pictures that portrayed him as a loving, attentive dad. In private, though, his temper flared at the slightest mistake. "I told you not to mention anything about how I treat you at home, Kel," he'd hiss, eyes steely, whenever the boy inadvertently let slip his father's coldness. "People won't understand me like you do, so keep quiet." Kel felt torn and scared. The fatherly attention was overshadowed by the knowledge that Martin's kindness was superficial. Diana saw through it instantly. During one of her visits, she confronted Martin. "You think you can buy his love with trips and toys? You never cared before. Why now? He just smirked. I'm allowed to change my ways, aren't I? Maybe you're the problem here, too old to provide a stable environment. Amid this escalating tension, a surprising figure appeared, David, a young celebrity known for championing children's rights. He had heard rumors about a boy named Kel living under suspicious conditions after his mother's passing, and decided to investigate quietly. Although famous, David maintained a serious dedication to philanthropic causes. He arranged to meet Diana through a shared contact who recognized how dire Kel's situation might be. One late afternoon, a sleek car pulled up in front of Diana's small suburban home. Out stepped David, tall and poised, wearing an expression of quiet concern. Diana greeted him politely, still taken aback that such a prominent name would show an interest in her grandson's plight. Inside the living room, David listened carefully as Diana narrated the transformations in Martin's behavior, the manipulative kindness, and the hints of deeper wrongdoing. With each detail, David grew more convinced that Kel's story needed to be heard. I'll attend the custody hearing, he said firmly, and share my observations, if that helps your case. Diana felt new hope flicker inside her. She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. Thank you. You have no idea how much this means, she whispered. At last, the day of the custody hearing arrived. Clouds cast shadows across the city skyline, as though nature sensed the weight of the confrontation. Inside the courthouse, tension buzzed. Martin stood with his lawyer, wearing a polished suit and an air of arrogance. Diana, wearing her best dress, clutched Kel's hand, trying to still his trembling. David took a seat quietly in the gallery, unnoticed by most, but prepared to speak if given a chance. Judge Rowan, an older man with a stern expression, presided. He called the session to order, inviting Diana's lawyer and Martin's lawyer to begin. Martin's representative delivered a smooth opening statement. Mr. Martin regrets the tragic loss of Ms. Paula and has shouldered fatherly responsibilities with unwavering devotion. The grandmother, Ms. Diana, lacks the finances and stamina to raise a child properly. Her interference stems from misguided sympathy, not from Kel's best interests. Diana's attorney countered with a calm but firm narrative, citing evidence of Martin's neglect, including statements from neighbors who noticed Kel often alone or unsupervised. The two sides clashed in a swirl of accusations, but the real moment of truth came when the judge asked Kel to speak, sensing the boy's story was more important than any adult speculation. 6-year-old Kel stood in the center of the room, dwarfed by the formal setting. Heart pounding, he cast a nervous glance at Martin, who offered a tight-lipped smile as if to say, "You know what's good for you." Kel felt the weight of his father's unspoken threat. Then he looked at Diana, who gave him a reassuring nod. Lastly, he noticed David in the corner, eyes encouraging, and that gave him a surge of courage. "Kel," began Judge Rowan gently, "do you want to tell us how your father treats you?" Kel cleared his throat, voice trembling. "My dad, he started being really nice after Grandma filed custody. But before that, he never cared if I ate or if I was sad. He told me to forget Mom. He never gave me bedtime stories. He was cold." Kel's small voice filled the silent courtroom. Martin's lawyer interjected, "Your Honor, the child might be confused due to trauma. Let's not place undue weight on his statements." But Judge Rowan silenced him with a stern glance. "Let the boy speak," he insisted. Then Kel dropped the most shocking part. "I overheard Dad talking on the phone. He said, he messed with Mom's car because he needed her out of the way for insurance money. He also said he'd do anything to keep me quiet." His voice cracked. "I'm scared. Please, help me." A collective gasp swept the courtroom. Martin's face twisted in fury as he snapped, "This is ridiculous," but Judge Rowan banged his gavel, calling for order. Shaken spectators exchanged stunned glances. David stood abruptly, requesting permission to speak. Given his public standing, the judge allowed it. David approached the bench, explaining that from conversations with Diana and Kel, he believed Kel's account was credible. "The child's detail and fear are real," David said, voice measured. "We mustn't ignore the possibility that Martin orchestrated this entire setup around insurance money." Judge Rowan declared a recess so the court could review newly revealed evidence. Meanwhile, Martin's lawyer tried in vain to spin the narrative, claiming Kel was just mixing up nightmares with reality. Martin, white-knuckled with rage, cursed under his breath. Diana huddled with Kel, offering comfort as best she could. Across the room, David made calls, ensuring that local authorities and investigative reporters who specialized in child welfare would follow up. He refused to stand by while a child's claim of sabotage went unexamined. When the session resumed, Judge Rowan delivered a decision that felt like thunder, due to the severity of the child's allegations and the need for a thorough investigation. The court orders Mr. Martin to be detained for further questioning. Interim custody of Kel is hereby granted to Ms. Diana. The entire courtroom exploded into chatter. Martin's face flared with outrage, but uniformed officers seized him before he could erupt into violence. Kel let out a shaky exhale, clinging to Diana's side, tears streaming as confusion mingled with immense relief. The aftermath wasn't easy. Authorities had to unravel the claim that Martin tampered with Paula's vehicle. Yet, as more evidence surfaced, like incomplete records of repair shops Martin visited, suspicious messages on Martin's phone about taking care of the problem, the case strengthened. Day by day, Kel's story gained traction, and Martin's protestations of innocence rang hollow. Back in Diana's small, cozy home, Kel was adjusting. He quickly discovered that life with his grandmother, though modest, was filled with love and stability. Simple routines like mealtimes, bedtime stories, and gentle morning greetings gave Kel the sense of safety he'd lacked. Nights were still haunted by nightmares, but at least here, someone held him close until he fell back asleep. David remained a quiet supporter in the background, ensuring the legal process moved forward properly. He visited Kel once to see how he was faring, bringing along a soft plush toy. "You've been incredibly brave," David told him gently. "Your voice changed your life, and it might help others who face similar struggles." Kel nodded, hugging the plush toy, realizing that sometimes it only takes one moment of truth-telling to set everything right, even if that moment also hurts. Eventually, Martin faced formal charges related to insurance fraud and possible involvement in tampering with Paula's car. As the truth finally unraveled, the court made permanent the custody arrangement. Kel would remain with Diana. Though the boy had lost a mother, he gained the unwavering devotion of a grandmother who refused to let him slip through the cracks of a broken system. In the weeks and months after the final verdict, Kel's demeanor blossomed. He giggled more often, found it easier to concentrate at school, and even made friends who didn't remember the rumors swirling about his father. Diana took him on weekend outings, picnics by the river, short trips to museums, and fun afternoons at local fairs. Each memory felt like a second chance at childhood. On a brisk Saturday afternoon, David returned for a final visit. He found Kel in the yard, playing a small catch game with Diana. After exchanging greetings, David knelt by Kel and said, "You might not understand it fully right now, but your courage changed a lot of lives, yours, your grandmother's, and even all the people who learned of your story. You proved that one small voice can stand up to the biggest injustices." Kel, eyes wide, gave a shy smile. "You believed me," he whispered. "Thank you." David patted his shoulder. "I think you taught us all something important, that telling the truth matters, no matter how scary it seems." This remarkable journey of a little boy named Kel reveals how speaking up, even at a mere 6 years old, can tear down walls of neglect, deception, and cruelty. It reminds us that true family is not about bloodline alone, but about those who truly see and protect us. Diana's unwavering fight exemplifies how a caretaker's love can shift the entire course of a child's life. David's involvement shows the profound effect of an ally who believes you when it counts. The story also affirms that cruelty rooted in greed eventually crumbles under the weight of truth. Now, dear viewer, think about the quiet battles going on around you, your neighbors, family members, or even acquaintances at work who might be grappling with hidden struggles. Are you willing to be their ally, to stand as that beacon of support so they don't face the darkness alone? If this story moved you, consider spreading kindness today. Offer a listening ear to someone who might not feel heard. Reach out to a child you suspect might need help or to an elder who might be fighting battles you know nothing about. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Motivation for Success for more stories that illuminate the power of empathy and bold honesty. Life's storms are inevitable, but sometimes one person's courage, no matter how small or young, can open the path toward healing, hope, and a better future for us all.